right. I'm gonna give people some time to jump in. It's 10 o'clock here in Los Angeles. It's like what 1 p.m. lunchtime there on the East Coast. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Akuity's webinar about empowering teams and future-proofing infrastructure. Um, and so let's see here. Let's do a little quick housekeeping while I wait for people to trickle in. I see people still trickling in here. Remember to use the Q&A button down there. So if you have a question or if you want us to expand on anything, type it in the Q&A. I won't be able to see the Q&A, but I have Angelica and Alexis here, also from Akuity, to be able to answer any questions that you may have. And they'll flag something if if it's like a great question to answer live. So that's your incentive to ask really, really awesome questions for me to answer it live. Here, let's see. Here we have about 15 people here on 16. Okay, I'll start in a few minutes here. Hopefully everyone's doing well. I'm ready for a break. I don't know how everyone's ears are, but I'm ready for a break. Hope everyone's is doing well wherever they are. Kind of just so checking out here, 17 people. So if the chat should be open now. So everyone here, say hello. Say hello. Tell me where you're from. Where you're. Tell me where you're from and what's your favorite color. Let's see here. Let's see if I get people chatting here. I'm gonna say I am. I'll start it off. From Los Angeles, California. My favorite color is red. There. Anyone else here? Oh, purple. Nice, Alice. All right. Canada. Sweet. Orange. Orange is always an interesting color. It's interesting favorite color. Never had anyone say orange, so that's pretty cool. Um, let's see here. Blue. New York City blue, I guess. Blue. I'm more of a Dodger blue. Is that too early? Sorry. Houston orange. Okay, so Houston orange, that makes sense. Orange for Argo. I like that. All right, Minnesota blue. Indiana gray. That's kind of cool. Gray color. Awesome. Um, so we can only send message to hosts and panelists, not everyone. So I'm reading these out loud. So Austin, thank you, Luke, by the way. Austin, Texas, burnt orange. Awesome, cool. All right, looks like we got a good mix here of people. From Minnesota, Indiana, Dallas, Austin. Sweet. All right. So it's 5 minutes after here. Let me get started. So this webinar is about empowering teams and future-proofing infrastructure. My name is Christian Hernandez. I am the head of community over here at Akuity. I am also a maintainer of the Argo Project, a maintainer of the Open GitOps project as well. I am a guitar player, so as if anyone sees my background, anyone that knows me has talked to me, is I have a small collection of guitars here. And so I'm here to talk about open source and how it's become like a pivotal role in cloud native computing. And where I want to start is Akuity and why Akuity exists. And so quick introduction for those who don't know, Akuity was founded by the original creators of the Argo project. So Hong, Jesse, and Alex, they were actually at a company called Athletics long time ago. And they created what was kind of an initial version of what is now today our Argo workflows, and to better utilize Kubernetes and cloud native. They saw very early on how it's going to be a game changer. And obviously, it takes a village. So Intuit saw this, and they were actually going to make a strategic change to run everything on Kubernetes and everything on the cloud, right? And so that was like a strategic move, and that's why they acquired Applatix. And Applatix, they actually created what we now know as the Argo Project, right? With Hong, Jesse, and Alex in the mix. Obviously, it takes a village there at Intuit with all the other members of Intuit, and they really ran Argo all projects. Today I'm going to focus on Argo CD, but they ran Argo as in production, right? And so in production, they were dog fooding. That's kind of like our founders. That's kind of their MO because they do the same at Akuity, as I'm going to explain a little later. But they ran it through its paces and decided to create Akuity based on a lot of best practices and kind of codified reference architecture and all of that codified into a platform. But before I get to the platform, I want to rewind a little bit and talk a little bit about when Intuit made the strategic direction to go to all cloud and all Kubernetes, right? And that's because Kubernetes was a game changer. Kubernetes was a disruption. It's they're in the industry, and we finally had a platform, right? A platform to build other platforms, as Kelsey Hightower says. We had Kubernetes to be able to kind of normalize or kind of provide a common interface between cloud systems, right? So the same way you run an application in AWS is the same way you're going to run it in GCP, in the same way you're going to run it maybe like on DigitalOcean, wherever, right? Like we have kind of now this like common way of deploying and managing applications. And so this was very, very, very attractive to not only this C-level, V-level people about getting quicker releases for applications, quicker time to market, but it was also attractive to the system engineers because it made their lives easier. But in making the lives easier of a lot of people, we sort of left the developer behind a little bit because now developers need to be able to know a lot about the system that they're deploying on, where maybe as in a previous way, kind of like with VMs and stuff, they just kind of FTP. I know I'm showing my age, but kind of FTP the application over, deploy the application over in a Jenkins pipeline, and like the application is there. Whereas now they have all these primitives to learn, and so Intuit saw this. Intuit saw the challenge. Intuit saw the fact, okay, we're going to be making a strategic move to the cloud and to Kubernetes, everything running on Kubernetes, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so, but they saw the challenge, and the challenge really is developers aren't really comfortable with Kubernetes, especially in the beginning days. It was a lot of different paradigms, a lot of different. It was a paradigm shift, and a lot of different new things that they needed to know. Like all of a sudden, they need to know what a service is in a relation to a network, and things like that. And it wasn't really developer friendly either, right? So Kubernetes was and still is, right, at its core. Like if you're using straight Kubernetes, a command line driven framework. And so a lot of the times the people that are implementing Kubernetes were really giving their developers a subpar developer experience, right? Like they didn't know how to manage configuration drift. They needed to hunt for logs. It was really hard to maintain and scale. I think originally everyone saw Kubernetes kind of like they treated it as a VMware where they have one central Kubernetes with a bunch of nodes, and it's like that's not really the point of Kubernetes. And so it was really hard to maintain that platform, and there was no UI right in Kubernetes, and so they had this issue at Intuit, and so really what people were landing on was using GitOps, right? And so I can do a whole webinar on GitOps. We've had webinars in the past with about GitOps, so go ahead and check those out on our if you go to Qt.io, our past events are there. But GitOps really, and being from the Open GitOps project, is GitOps really just became the operational framework for Kubernetes. And it's something that people just naturally landed on was being able to use something like a source of truth as an interface into Kubernetes, right? And so it had things like increase the deployment frequency, reducing the mean time to recovery, and really kind of provided kind of a view into how the system is being managed because everyone understands Git. Like even myself with a systems background, I understand Git workloads. It's kind of like a common thing. Git workloads is a common thing in systems, right? Like if you are in IT, you are going to be touching or be taking a part of the Git workflows in some capacity, and really it really sort of made sense because developers now understand the workflow getting into onto a system, and so for that reason, GitOps was really attractive, but it was still missing like a few key components, right? GitOps is a methodology. It's an operational framework, right? But was really no user experience built around it, right? It was just kind of like, okay, this is kind of how we're all going to work together. Is what GitOps is. It's an operational framework for this new technology that we had, and so with Intuit wanting to go all in the cloud, go all in on Kubernetes, go all in on GitOps, but also want to provide a rich developer experience, came up with the Argo project, and more specifically, what I'm going to talk about is the Argo CD, right? And so, really, Argo CD is I always like to see it as like the initial attempt, the first attempt at an IDP, right, an internal developer platform, because the idea was, yes, let's use GitOps paradigms, let's GitOps paradigms, GitOps workflows, this methodology, but let's provide a convenient user experience around it, so that way developers can deploy their application, can on-ramp their applications without having to learn a lot of the primitives, right? They get kind of like a visual representation of what their deployment looks like, their health status, things like that. So you get like an easy way to set up your declarative deployments. You quickly on-ramp developers and end users onto the GitOps methodology, and it provided a very useful Kubernetes dashboard. It really, I think, became the dashboard for Kubernetes, and really it was a way to also manage clusters, right? You can also manage clusters and the deployments and things like that. And so it was really pivotal for the success at Intuit to be able to deploy and manage their application workloads onto Kubernetes. And in fact, a lot of people since then, include Intuit, but since then have used Argo CD to migrate to Kubernetes. So not only is it like the end game, right? The end game of using something like Argo CD, but also a way to get there as well. So, standing up and, slowly on-ramping and migrating to Kubernetes. That's something else that people are doing now with Argo CD. So it's not only like a management user experience platform, but it's also a way to migrate to Kubernetes. And so, so we, at Akuity, we ran, like I said before, at Intuit, they ran Argo through its paces, through the migration, through the large scales, all the cuts, all the bruises, all the lessons learned, and all the best practices. Our founders, Hong, Jesse, and Alex, took and created a platform based on those lessons learned for an enterprise-ready solution. And so a lot of people ask me, if you guys are open source Argo, you guys created Argo, cool, you're in the community. What's really the difference, right? Like if running Argo with Akuity versus running Argo open source, and I say, what's really great is Argo on Akuity is open source, but we re-architected for best practices. So typically I show this in comparison between Akuity's open source architecture and the open source architecture and Akuity's architecture, because I always like to say it is the same Argo CD, that you know and love, but we just kind of re-architected and broke the components apart. And the reason for that is that the open source Argo CD is a hub and spoke design. You just at its core, you install it on a Kubernetes cluster. You add a bunch of Kubernetes clusters to Argo, and then you deploy your applications. So this poses a few problems, and something that that our founders found very quickly over at Intuit. But this hub and spoke is kind of like a push design, meaning that the central control plane needs to reach out into the managed clusters. So that means a few things. One, each managed cluster, you need to open up that Kubernetes API port. That's a given. That, obviously Argo CD needs to be able to reach out to that API port. You may or may not, but most often than not, you will need to open up those firewall rules, right? Those VPC rules between the Argo, the central Argo instance and your managed cluster. And so to be able to reach there. So right away you have firewall and network concerns there. You have also all the credentials for all these managed clusters now are in the central, or you need to give that to Argo CD. So now they're all in the central location. They're all in a central location, and the fact that this now becomes not only a single point of failure, but it also becomes a security concern, because once if a bad actor gets access to this control plane, whether the bad actor be a person or a script or some sort of malicious code, they now have access to your other clusters. More often than not, that's cluster admin, just for all intents and purposes. But this poses a challenge on that aspect, on the security aspect, and but it also on the scaling aspect, whereas all these components need, the more and more clusters you add, the more and more applications you add, the more and more resources you need to give Argo CD. So you can scale up is probably the first thing. Then people typically scale out, maybe add more nodes and start moving each component into a different node on the same Kubernetes cluster. But you can only scale up and scale out so much. And people then start doing some sharding, right? Where the control, you run multiple instances of the controller pod on that same Kubernetes cluster to try to minimize certain things. But at the end, you can only go up and out so far. And so that's where the Akuity platform comes into play. So the Akuity platform is based on what we call a hybrid architecture, right? Meaning that, okay, you do just get that central feeling, but you also get a distributed, on the back end, a distributed type of platform. And so what this means is that, okay, we just broke all the components apart, and then we added them to each managed cluster, and then we added an agent to each managed cluster. So all these components, right? So if I go back, the repo server, controller, API server, run on the managed clusters here. And so the only thing that gets access to this managed cluster is the agent, right? So it's all enclosed in each managed cluster. So the agent's responsible to report back to the Akuity platform. So reporting back to the Akuity platform, it gives information about status information and things really for the UI. Everything else is self-contained. So a sync that happens on an application on this cluster is controlled, it's maintained in here. The same for this cluster and this cluster. And since we are using an agent, and since we are reaching out, we don't need access to your cluster, right? We only need outbound access. We no longer need inbound access. So you can keep that API closed. You can keep that firewall closed. That all works out. And the agent's responsible for reporting that information back to the centralized platform. So also with the agent, we don't need access to your credentials because we're communicating with the agent. So we don't really care about the credentials for the managed cluster. We don't install any credentials. We don't store any of the Kubernetes credentials on our platform. That's all on your side. Because we just communicate with the agent, and the agent's responsible for telling what the controller what to do. And also with scale, you get, as I was saying before, all operations are managed inside each individual cluster. And so if this cluster here happens to be busy, it doesn't affect any of these clusters here. And as you add clusters to the platform, your compute gets that much bigger. So it actually scales as you add more workloads to it, only because then you gain that additional compute. And it's very, very, very lightweight, right? So everything's all kind of just syncs and Git clones all kind of happen in each individual managed cluster. So we don't even need access to your Git repos. It could be internal Git repos as well. That is the Akuity platform and how Managed Argo CD works. We also have a ton of plugins. But instead of going through a slide about the plugins, I'm going to kind of show you the platform itself. So I have here the Akuity platform. Here I have a Argo CD instance. I can quickly create another one here. Let me just call this webinar. And here we can choose a version, right? Notice that some version has the Akuity logo next to it. That has the ability to we do everything in open source, but everything lands on our platform first before we push it up. There's things like server-side pagination that we have on our platform that we're still pushing that upstream. Things like OCI tooling, things like that. But you can elect to choose open source Argo, which is fine. It looks like the UI. All right, and then oh yeah, let's call this webinar. Let's create, and so it's as simple as that. It can create an Argo CD instance. What's really cool about this is that this API to create the Argo CD instance, it's open, right? So you can use, we have like a Swagger page, but you can use also our Terraform provider. We have a CLI for scripts, or you can like hook it up into Backstage, which I'll show you in a minute how that ends up looking like. So I have that instance up and running, but I already have this instance ready to go, right? And if I drop into my so I have no clusters. Let me create a cluster. So here I'm creating a Kubernetes cluster here local on my system. So on my little desktop here that I'm using. And so to show you that Akuity, the version of Argo that's in Akuity, doesn't need access, right? Like I am obviously behind a firewall on my little home network here. If I do get pods, right? I have my system coming up. And so what I can do is I can just add a cluster. And then it'll give me a kubectl command that I can copy. You can also like download the manifest if you want to do it manually. But then I can go and paste that CLI command. And then in the Qt namespace, we have the agent up and running. So that agent is getting created. I have the application controller, the notification controller, the repo server, and all the stuff that I need in order to deploy an application to this cluster is running here. Again, I'm here on my local desktop, but I can see that it's adding, and then now I have an application. The cluster is up and running, and now I'm able to deploy applications to this cluster. I mentioned before the for platform engineers that are using Backstage, you can actually use Akuity's platform to deploy and manage Argo CD instances, right? So if you're using Backstage and someone requests an Argo CD instance, you can use Akuity to deploy and manage these, and it'll kind of look like this. So this is kind of like a platform engineer viewpoint. Most of our customers that aren't using Backstage, right, that are just kind of using Argo, usually get away with one or two Argo CD instances. So the scale is absolutely there. What I do want to show is the way you can set up Argo CD, right? You have to set up Argo CD. You can just manage it here with ClickOps. Again, as well, you can do it with Terraform. Add accounts, add configurations, add RBAC. What we really have is extensions. So we actually even further manage not just the agent-based design, but we have other things as well, like the extensions. We have an Argo CD rollout, the Akuity log, the sync history, the AI assistant, cross-plane metrics plugins installed. So when I go back to, oops. to my Argo CD instance, I can actually go in and start clicking the details here, and I can see things like, let me pick a better application. I can do events. If I could, maybe it's this one. I swear I did this the other day. Maybe it's too new. Yes, probably I could do the audit logs. So the audit logs tell who did, when the sync started, who did it, and what that status is. I can see the sync history here with Dora metrics, and be able to see information about what the sync history was, what the status was, who initiated here. You get the audit logs. You can get AI Assistant. You can type things like what was the last sync status, and the AI Assistant will tell you information. This is really, really great for triage. Like you can ask, oh, hey, why is my application down? Or why is it, why is it degraded? Things like that. And so that'll give you, not only do you have like Argo CD the way it looks, right? Like it just looks, feels, acts just like Argo CD. The agent-based design and implementation detail provides a lot of value. And also we have these plugins, supportable plugins that we provide in order to make your life easier with Argo CD. So when we started with Argo, with the Akuity platform, we had Argo CD, but as we grew and as the needs for our engineering team and the needs for our customers arose, we started building other tools and other things into the platform. The next one is Kargo, right? And so we have Kargo, which really, really came about a pain point that we had internally at Akuity, right? And so the idea was that the CI/CD for GitOps and Argo CD felt a little disjointed because, when you think of CI/CD, you think of it kind of like this linear kind of process. Something happens, something gets built, you throw it to an environment, you run some tests, and then you keep going down the line. We think of it very linear, but actually it looks more like this, right? So with CI/CD and Argo, it kind of starts looking like this because Argo kind of just takes care of that last mile. CD kind of, as soon as it changes in Git, it's going to deploy that. And so what ends up happening is that things like testing and promotions start getting pushed to the left to CI. So we did that ourselves, right? A lot of people using either Jenkins or GitHub Actions started pushing more and more into CI, where really it didn't belong. And what we're seeing at least in the context of GitOps, CI is being over leveraged to do the job of what CD is really doing, right? So if you think about it, CI pipelines and CD pipelines have different goals, right? So like CI has, given some code, build me an artifact, or given this, given this code, run some tests against it, right? So they're really, really short-lived. They're predefined, and once that job is done, it's considered successful. Like, okay, it's like really like think of it like a one and done type of scenario, fire and forget sort of things. And it's really smaller in scope, right? It's really top down, very rigid, and it's really suitable for like building something or testing something or running unit tests. Whereas CD pipeline is like given an artifact, given something that's already built, roll it out safety. So whereas CI is short-lived, it's indefinite really for CD pipelines and things like canaries, manual checks, approvals, right? I've known people running 2 versions for weeks, right? There's bake-in periods, things like that. It's something that CI isn't really built for. And really CD isn't really done until the next deployment starts. So it requires ultimate flexibility and continuous verification. Just because it's deployed in production doesn't mean you're not verifying, you're continuously verifying and things like that. So we found this challenge. We found this challenge and saw that there needs to be a better way, right? And we always ask like, what about Argo CD? What does Argo CD actually do, right? So Argo CD actually deploys changes from a Git repo to a single target environment. Even if you're using application sets just create other applications. It's still that application is a one-to-one relationship to the cluster. And it doesn't understand relationships between deployment targets. It doesn't provide a pipeline to orchestrate anything. It reads from Git, right? But it doesn't really write or interface with Git other than just read. And it really doesn't verify, deployments or updates after the deploy is complete, right? There's posting hooks and things like that that you can integrate, but Argo CD itself doesn't do that for you, right? And so what we thought is we at Akuity, we saw this problem. We were actually experiencing this ourselves, and we thought, well, we need something in the middle, right? We need something like a continuous promotion kind of reconciler in the middle where we push CI and leave CI to do what it does. We leave CD, GitOps, do what it does, but there needs to be like an orchestrating changes, right? Going back and forth, changes or staging things and orchestrating how changes get promoted, right? And so we thought about we need to do something about this, and it is where we came up with Kargo, right? And so Kargo is our first open source project. Right after the Argo project, we came up with another project called Kargo, and the idea is to be that middle piece, right? To be that orchestration piece in that middle ground. And so how Kargo ends up working is that just like continuous promotion, the idea, it kind of sits in the middle between CI and CD, or CI and GitOps CD. It depends on how you want to look at it. What ends up happening is that Kargo is like looking at some sort of repository. In this image graph here, it's looking at a container image, right? And some CI process, some human, someone makes a change, and something pushes that image update to container registry. Kargo sees that and presents that as a deployable artifact, as it were. It can either automatically do this or have someone approve it. But if once it detects that change and gets deployed, what Kargo ends up doing is it writes that change to Git. It writes that change back to Git. And then Argo CD does what it continuously does, right? It'll see that change, and then it'll deploy that change. But after that change is deployed, Kargo can then verify that change into the environment, and either mark it as a successful deployment or not. It'll continuously verify that for you as well. And so Kargo really just provides kind of a layer on top of your GitOps implementation, or or a interface between CI and CD. Depends how you look at it, and really just collects a way of deploying artifacts that you need into a GitOps environment, right? And so what's really cool about Kargo is built with GitOps in mind. So if you're using GitOps, you're probably running, if you're knee deep in GitOps, you're probably running into problems with promotion and bespoke CI scripts. So Kargo aims to replace kind of a lot of that guesswork into a common interface. And so GitOps support, with GitOps support in mind, progressive delivery at the forefront as well. And so before I move on, I kind of want to show you a Kargo. Let me refresh this page so make sure I'm here. Yeah, so Kargo demo, really quick. This is how Kargo looks like. And so what ends up happening is that Kargo is tracking some sort of repository. It can track one or many repositories. For this instance, I'm doing a container image and a Git repository. So if you think about it, GitOps promotions is actually a collection of things that need to happen, right? If someone makes a change to an application that produces an image, and that update requires a configuration change, well, those two things need to get promoted together. And this is kind of how I have it set up here. If I make this a little bigger, right? I'm looking for images with the new semver tag. And also, anytime someone makes a change to any of these directories, I'm going to also present that as a deployable unit, right? So what I said artifact is really like a meta artifact. Once it detects a change, it produces this meta artifact, what we call a freight, which is basically a collection of those two things, of those two images. So if I look at the live manifest, I can see that someone made a commit to this repo. and this is the ID of that commit. And then someone tagged an image with the semver that I was looking for, and this is the SHA of that image. And so, like I said before, it's not necessarily an artifact, but a kind of like a meta artifact that you want to take these two artifacts, the actual artifacts, like where to get them, and promote them together because this image needs a configuration change, and and they need to be promoted together. And so once that's down here, I can then, this change here, I can then promote it down the line. As you see here, this version is running in dev. As it's color coded, this version is running in staging. There was a canary or an A/B test that came out, so we have two versions running here. Once someone saw that it passed right here in one of these two things, they decided to promote one of them, and that's what this version is running in production. And so, and the way to promote this is very, very easy. I'm going to promote this, and then I'm going to click on the freight I want to promote, and I click yes. So what ends up happening here is that Kargo will then take these artifacts and write them to a specific Git repo. So once I click yes, that promotion is getting promoted, right? And I run these steps to promote these. I'll just make them a little bigger, but I'm not going to go through them one by one. It runs through these promotion steps, and it will then finally sync the corresponding Argo CD application once it writes those to Git. And as you see, I'm having this version is running now in dev. If I can see the healthy status, if I click here, it'll take me to the Argo CD instance here. And as you see here, I don't know if you can see here, but it says it succeeded a few seconds ago, so it did sync a few seconds ago. So here, I can orchestrate the promotion of these artifacts. What's really, really cool though is that this wasn't working yesterday, but I kind of want it to not work. If I want to promote the staging into the test environment, I can say, okay, I want to promote this guy. What ends up happening is that once the promotion happens, I can then do a verification. So as you can see here, there was a successful verification. There's been a few failed verifications here. If I look at the verification YAML, I'm hitting a webhook, right? So the verification can be a webhook. It can be you can query Prometheus. You can CloudWatch. You can query Datadog. This is really very, very ultimately flexible, and you can have multiple verifications. So you don't have to just hit Prometheus. You can hit Prometheus and a webhook, and whatever other tests you need once that promotion happens. And so that gets promoted there. What's also cool is if I try to promote, let's say I want to promote into this production instance in Central. I can't like click on any of these, right? These are all grayed out. This is because this is a CD pipeline, or this is a continuous promotion pipeline where if it doesn't pass downstream, you won't be able to promote it upstream, right? So like this is kind of like a DAG sort of kind of workflow where you have dependencies on downstreams, right? For instance, I don't want to promote into test if it didn't pass in staging, for example. But then you can just like any instance, right? Like you have a hotfix, you don't want to go down, you don't want to promote that down to down the line. You just want to go straight into production because you have an outage and you just you need to go. You can actually manually approve it for each environment, and then you can be able to promote that as well. So our Kargo, like you see before, integrates directly to Argo CD. So it actually doesn't do the sync. It lets Argo CD does what it does. And Kargo really sits as an orchestrator between any number of Argo CD instances that your application may be running on. And so it has also enterprise ready with rich RBAC as well, that you'd be able to have different groups, with SSO, different groups be able to do different things with Kargo. You can have multi-tenant here. As you see here, I have different projects assigned to different teams for Kargo. So it integrates really, really well with Argo CD, but it's not just an Argo CD promotion. We aim it to be a generic infrastructure as code GitOps promotion tool. I know some Flux users are using it already. And we have plans to support things like Terraform and like Lambda functions and things like that. So that's kind of the feature of Kargo. So we have Argo, we have Kargo, and now we have something what we call KubeVision. So KubeVision is something that we decided to do and never realized how popular it was going to get. But it was really something that was needed in the Argo ecosystem. Specifically, if you're those of you who are watching that are using open source Argo and they see KubeVision, and all of a sudden they go, yes, we need that. And it's really an aggregation of data that Argo CD is already collecting. So when the more and more you're adding clusters to Argo CD and more you're using it in the enterprise, the more you'll need long-term historical information about your deployments and what happened, right? Between some specific timeline, right? And so KubeVision is taking all that information for you that Argo CD is already collecting and building a dashboard on top of it and doing a long-term retention, right? And so it's really it's really popular because for security posture, like it is, you have if you're running like an application with a known CVE or you're running outdated container images and you need to update those. Where's your workload running? How much is it? Where are your hotspots? Things like that. And also just basic triage. You want to see a history of what happened and why, and being able to answer a lot of those questions effectively, right? It is meant to be kind of an aggregated view of what's already happening that you don't have to no longer hunt for this information, right? And so it has things like a Kubernetes Explorer, containers visibility, image visibility, infrastructure visibility, all those things that you need. It's meant to be a supplement to your monitoring system, right? Like you're still going to be using Prometheus and Grafana, and you're still going to be using like long-term retention. It's supposed to supplement that and focus specifically on GitOps deployments and continuous delivery, continuous deployment. And so, like everything else has an AI assistant, it gives you all the special graphs that you need. And so with KubeVision, you can see it here on this dashboard, right? So here is your cluster as a whole. You see information about the workload. So for here, it's a pod that's running, and this is the Argo CD application. But you see the non-applicable ones. These are things that are not on an Argo CD application. So it has visibility beyond just kind of your Argo CD managed resources. It has all these resources that's running on the cluster. So as soon as you add a cluster to your to the Akuity platform, we start gathering this information. People always say, "Well, how are you getting this information?" And they don't know that Argo actually keeps track of this information for you. You actually most people don't know, like, oh, it keeps track, yeah, because it knows about things it's not managing. And we just kind of collect that data and retain it for a long time for you, right? Because Argo CD's UI really is, there's runtime information there, but there's no really big historical information for you, especially not over a long period of time. So I can see things, I can go down on actually, yeah, so these are the deployments. I can filter down by pod and see all the pods running. Let's look at this namespace here. This is running in a cluster called prod under the namespace monitoring, and this is a replica set. I can further drill down and see information about this workload. And see here, analyze pod logs. Let's see what that does. So see that how our Akuity assistant is integrated into this view, right? And so another thing is what people really like is the deprecated APIs. And so, and let's go down to prod, let's say. So the deprecated APIs is as you all know, is a major pain point for for anyone managing Kubernetes. So when an API becomes deprecated, you have we'll bubble that up for you. So you can go here and say, oh, in prod, we have it's deprecated in 1.28. We're running in 1.28. It's deprecated in 1.29, and it will be completely unavailable 1.32. It'll give you time to provide maybe a migration path, right? You need to go change the spec for this particular workflow. It'll bubble all this information up, and you can see it from all your clusters, right? This is not on just one cluster. This is just from everything that Akuity is managing. And another thing that I want to call out is the images. What's really, really cool is that now we're scanning images that's running on your platform, and we'll call out any vulnerability that you may have. So this one has one vulnerability found. In the CVE, you may want to maybe update this container. And so if I scroll back down here, like there's this one here as well. And it'll actually give you the link. We're using Trivy to scan this here. And so this is kind of if there's a known CVE, publicly known CVE from a public database that you may be running, we'll bubble those up for you and let you know that maybe you want to update this container, and we'll provide the information that we found. So this is kind of like a central location to be able to see all your vulnerabilities, all your deprecated APIs, and also the infrastructure as well. This isn't really like the CPU utilization for this isn't really high. There's only like 3 clusters and each have 1 node. But what I really like to do is look at the pods for your cluster, and you group them by cluster. So like the prod cluster has, looks like there's one pod that's using maybe more cores than the other one. There you see kind of like a heat map. What I like to do is separate by availability zone. So I can see if I have my availability zone maybe using one, maybe hotter than another. Maybe I want to spread that load a little bit there. And what's really, really cool is this is in the Argo CD UI, but it's also in the Argo CD plugin, right? So like if you're a systems manager here, but then you're a developer and you kind of want to see specifically to your application, we can even drop down here to like something I call the event timeline, where I can see information, the daemon set, like what happened here, when the health changed and what was the status of that. I can see all that information here. And, I can see like in the past 14 days, for example. Let me go maybe a little less than that. It's past 7 days. Yeah. So you can see here that this was healthy, and then it changed to a warning, right? This health status has been changed, right? And you can see what time that changed, and what was the resulting was it looks like a sync started because it was healthy. So you can see that information. You can see who changed it, right? This little audit log, this little shoes are for, will tell you what happened in order to enact that change. And you can see all of that here from a developer's point of view. So again, you're providing a better developer experience, or you can see it as a manager, right? As a systems administrator. I can see events, logs, view the timeline as well for each individual workload or as a workload as a whole. And so that was actually a tour of the Akuity platform. So the Akuity platform now is what we call the end-to-end GitOps platform, right? And so it is it's basically what we took from Argo, the lessons we learned at Intuit and Argo, and it continuously expand the Akuity platform. It's really now become an end-to-end GitOps enterprise-ready solution. And so now you can not only deploy, but you can also promote and then continuously monitor, is what we like to call the Akuity platform. You can manage deployments, promotions, and monitoring in your GitOps enterprise platform. And so now with the Akuity platform, you kind of get that kind of unified vision. It's not just Argo CD. We want to expand and provide the ultimate type of enterprise platform for anyone that's, adopting GitOps, right? Adopting GitOps, not only in Kubernetes, but just beyond, right? So this is kind of like the idea behind Promote and Kargo. We want to just also work with other things as well. And so with that, I want to thank you. If you want to try out the Akuity platform, you want to learn more about the Akuity platform and what it provides, right? I kind of just gave you a taste here. Akuity.io/Akuity-platform. Go there, and there you can read more about the Akuity platform and all the things that it provides. There's also a convenient link to the 30-day trial. You can start a 30-day trial, no cost, no credit card, nothing. You can try it out for 30 days and you can try out all tool sets in the Akuity platform. You can try out Argo CD, you can try out Kargo, and you can also try out KubeVision as well. And so with that, I'm going to let me see, drop down into the Q&A, see if there's any Q&A that's come up so far, and I'll give yeah, about 5 minutes to answer any questions that anyone may have. I'm just scrolling through the chat here. Looks like, yeah, questions being answered. All right, all right, all right, all right. Any questions? And anyone big plans for the weekend here, for the holiday? I know what I'm doing. Absolutely nothing. Um, so hopefully you all doing nothing and just relaxing as well. Paul, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, Kargo. We have more information about Kargo as well. If you want to more information about Kargo, go to kargo.io. There is information there about that. So it looks like we got a question here. Yes. So yes. So Edgar Yip asked, with the RBAC configuring RBAC with the Akuity platform, do you still need to use the Argo CD syntax or Casbin as people know it by, but the Argo CD configuration with RBAC, or you can just do it all via Akuity? The answer is yes to those to that question, right? So if I go into settings, I can set up RBAC and I would still have to use the Casbin type of syntax, right? So you can have it here in a central location. Also, you can store this same as anything as Git or use the Akuity CLI or Terraform provider to set these up. But yes, you can use these as well. It's the RBAC here is one of the things. You can actually add scopes and things like that. But this should be familiar with anyone using Argo CD. Great question here. Okay. Any more questions? Edgar, thank you for your questions, Edgar. Cool, cool. I'm gonna give it like another few seconds. Here it looks like a lot of questions were answered already, so that's good, good. Oh, there's a few more here. Yeah, so someone asked, so all these tools mentioned here are not free, right? So just to recap, this is a very good question. So let me put my laser pointer here. So Argo CD, there's an open source Argo CD that you can use for sure. You can use that. Kargo is also open source. So again, go to kargo.io. KubeVision is actually specific to the Akuity platform. And so if you want to use the Akuity platform with all three tools integrated, that is, you get a 30-day free trial. So it's free for 30 days. And then there's a very affordable price plan. We have like, the different stages of like developer, enterprise, things like that. And so you can try the tools out for free. If you want to like kind of get your feet wet first, there's open source solutions. But if you want to get like a fully integrated experience, like maybe once you wet your feet a little bit, go to the Akuity free trial. It's 30 days free. I hope that answers that question there. Cool. Thank you, Ricardo. Yeah, so Argo rollouts is included in the Akuity platform, but we give you a convenient UI into it from Argo CD. So it's included in that, like you can use it into as part of the you basically it's an add-on to the Akuity platform, so you can use it. Argo events, it is I believe we don't have an enterprise version of that. You can use the open source for that. And if you need support for that, you can definitely reach out to our sales team. That's something we are contributors and maintainers of the Argo project. So none of this stuff is what is scary, right? Events, rollouts, workflows, it's all good. Cool, cool. All right. Yeah. So yeah. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Zach. But thank you, everyone, for joining this webinar. This recording will be up sometime later, so you'll get an email out. But for sure, catch us on akuity.io/Akuity Platform. You can catch us on our Discord, akuity.community. So if you want to drop, someone wants to drop that link there, akuity.community. That's our Discord for things like Kargo and other open source things. We're also on the open source CNCF, right? CNCF and Slack. We're there in the Argo channels, answering any questions there. So feel free to jump in, say hi on the Discord, say hi on the CNCF Slack, and look out for the email for that. So I think with that, we'll end this webinar. Thank you, everyone.